Steve Sarkisian doesn't like his SEC schedule. Welcome to the SEC.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. And if you're in Alabama, Louisiana, or Mississippi, catch us daily on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. All right, we got plenty to jump into. We'll have our celebrity guest picker coming up in just a few minutes. Taking a look at our celebrity guest picker standings. Bill Connolly from ESPN.com had quite a week last week. He jumped into a tie at first place with Stephen Garcia, Holden Mayo, and Jay Crane. Our celebrity guest picker today, Fozzy Whittaker. You're not going to want to miss that. We'll talk some football with him. But let's jump into going all around the conference, getting you caught up on the latest news in the SEC. We got to start over at Texas as Longhorns coach Steve Sarkisian not holding back on how he feels about his team's schedule this year. Remember last year when everybody was talking about Texas and, man, they got an easy schedule last year. Man, the schedule makers in the SEC office really did them some favors their first year in the SEC. Well, this year, Sark not a big fan of the schedule. While meeting with the media on Zoom on Thursday ahead of the matchup against Georgia this Saturday, Sark admitted he's not comfortable with the way Texas's schedule is laid out compared to other SEC teams. Sark saying, no, I'm not comfortable. I don't think there's enough continuity from a scheduling standpoint in the SEC. Sark's displeasure stems from the late season structure of Texas's schedule. The Longhorns have to close out the regular season with 3 conference games, SEC, while other teams like A&M, Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, they all get to host non-conference games, many of them FCS opponents, before getting back into conference action. Sark saying, I understand with us being new to the conference and how schedules get set years in advance, but I think there's some distinct advantages that some people have when they spread out their non-conference games throughout the season and they play non-conference games the second to last game of the year, and we're playing all ours on the front end. Combined with playing 4 games away from home in October, the Longhorns faced arguably the SEC's most difficult stretch of football, setting aside any considerations of opponent quality. Sark saying they're playing conference games earlier in the year where their team is 100% healthy. So I don't love our schedule, but it's our schedule. It's an interesting thought. I noticed that early in the year where Texas played, they went on the road, played Ohio State week 1, and then they came home and it was like, whatever it was, Sam Houston State, and, it was 3 slappies that they ran off easy wins against. While some other teams were getting in an early season SEC game, like Ole Miss got Kentucky and so on and so forth. And so it's an interesting thought, that I'm sure they'd like to be playing UTEP or San Jose State this week while, Ole Miss just played the Citadel and Auburn will get Mercer next week and so on and so forth. But Sark went on to say, I don't think there's a lot of parity from a scheduling standpoint of who's getting non-conference games when and who's getting what level of non-conference opponents because of the impact that it has down the road when you start talking about the playoffs. To me, it just feels like a Texas thing, right? Like, I mean, the SEC's scheduling your games and stuff, but did the SEC purposefully do this and say, hey, Texas, we're going to backload your schedule with all conference games and we're going to give other people a breather? Again, elsewhere in the conference, teams like Ole Miss and Georgia got to play SEC games within their first 3 weeks of the season where they were more healthier, right? So to Sark's point, Texas, they can't do much about their early season schedule in coming seasons because Texas, next year, they get to play Ohio State, return trip. They played there last year. This year, they'll play home next year. 2027, they get a return trip from Michigan. Remember, they went up to Michigan 2 years ago. So Michigan at home. In 2028, they'll go to Notre Dame, and then 2029, Notre Dame will come to Austin. So some big non-conference games scheduled for Texas coming up, where you look at what Ole Miss did in non-conference this year, and it's kind of like, all right, some other teams not really testing themselves. And right now, Texas is getting dinged for that extra loss week 1 at Ohio State when really they didn't have to schedule it. They could have not scheduled it and, had one less loss. So I get what he's saying. All right, let's jump around to some other SEC news and notes. Let's jump over to Florida as the Gators are headed to Oxford to take on the Ole Miss Rebels. And it is a battle of a team that's obviously fired their coach against a team that's fighting for a playoff spot. But injury report over Florida, wide receiver Vernell Brown listed as probable. That's one to watch because they're already down several wide receivers, and Trey Wilson and Dallas Wilson. Also listed as doubtful D lineman Caleb Banks, but that actually is a little bit of an upgrade. He's been down for much of the season, hasn't played since the LSU game, so Caleb Banks may be getting closer and closer to a return there for Florida. Meanwhile, over at LSU, some interesting news on quarterback Garrett Nussmeier. Their availability report came out Wednesday. LSU linebacker Whit Weeks was listed as questionable. And following a practice on Thursday, Frank Wilson labeled Whit Weeks a game day decision. As for the quarterback, Garrett Nussmeier, who got benched in last week's game at Alabama, Michael Van Buren came in. Frank Wilson told reporters earlier in the week both Van Buren and Nussmeier are going to play in this game against Arkansas. Well, apparently on Thursday, Wilson saying that Nussmeier is probable, saying that he re-aggravated a torso injury, I guess, and so it's a little bit concerning and something we need to monitor and continue to watch him. So listed as probable. So I guess it's going from healthy to probable. But some LSU fans probably saying, you know what? We've seen Nussmeier this year. Let's roll with Van Buren. Let's see more of him. By the way, Aaron Anderson, wide receiver for LSU, was listed as probable in the initial report Wednesday. Thursday, Frank Wilson said he will be ready to roll. So LSU gets one of their pass-catching weapons back. In other news, over at Texas, they got a really good health report this week. Defensive back Michael Taff and Jelani McDonald, they were both practicing and appear ready to go this week. So Texas injury report that came out on Wednesday, no players were on that list. So good news there for the Longhorns. Meanwhile, over at Oklahoma, giving an update on defensive back Gentry Williams. He was listed as doubtful for this game against Alabama. Running back Javonte Barnes listed as questionable, and D lineman R. Mason Thomas listed as questionable. Now, as for their quarterback, Brent Venables, talking with the media this week about John Mateer, said his hand is progressively getting healthier. Said he has seen evidence in practice throwing. He said it's been improving, and the velocity in which he's been able to throw, I've seen him getting better and better. And he will just continue to get healthier and better as the season goes on. So see how it does in a hostile environment over at Alabama on Saturday night. Over at Texas A&M, their latest injury report list, running back Lavian Moss still as out. Linebacker Scooby Williams still as out. He is, they've been trying to get him back for weeks. And then wide receiver Mario Craver listed as questionable. That's one to watch because he and Casey Concepcion have been so good in the receiving game for A&M, but going up against South Carolina, if they don't have Craver, that will be a big weapon that they could be down. Over at Mississippi State, they list quarterback Blake Shapen as questionable, along with offensive lineman Albert Reese. So Blake Shapen it was sounding like earlier in the week he wasn't going to play this week, but still listed as questionable. So we'll keep an eye on that. For Mizzou, tight end Brett Norfleet listed as questionable. In other SEC news, over at Arkansas, there's a lot of buzz about who's going to be their next head coach. As of last week, a lot of the Vegas odds had Ryan Silverfield as the future head coach from Memphis, but his odds have slipped a little bit, and now John Gruden and James Franklin are listed among the favorites in a few Vegas books as the next permanent head coach of Arkansas. So, again, this is sports betting odds. There's no real super intel here other than this is what one sports book is listing there. All right, over at Texas A&M and Vanderbilt, some good news as Joe Moore Award named their final 10 finalists. 2 schools from the SEC, A&M and Vanderbilt making the list. So 2 really good offensive lines. Neither A&M nor Vanderbilt have won the Joe Moore Award before. So that'll be certainly something to watch. College football playoff news, a little tidbit here. Mack Rhodes is stepping down as the College Football Playoff Selection Committee chair amid taking a leave of absence as the Baylor athletic director. Ross Dellinger putting out there that he's doing so for, quote, personal reasons, but interesting replacement. On Thursday, it was reported Mack Rhoades stepping down. Arkansas Athletic Director Hunter Yurachek has the committee formally approved him to serve as the new chair. So Hunter Yurachek, Arkansas Athletic Director, he is now takes over mid-season as the chair of the College Football Playoff Committee. So we'll see what that means. Look, he's got a lot on his plate right now. Hunter Yurachek's trying to find the next head coach of football at Arkansas, and now he's going to have a side gig, a side quest, if you will, of serving as the committee chair of the College Football Playoff. So see how he does with that added responsibility. All right, still more to come here on Locked On SEC. Our special guest, Fozzy Whittaker, will join us coming up next here on Locked On SEC. Look, guys, it is almost the weekend. It's time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more money every time you order. These players deliver when it matters most. Let's jump into it. For Georgia, we're going with running back Nate Frazier. Delivered in a big way. He rushed 12 times for 181 yards and a touchdown. When the pressure was on, Nate Frazier came through. No hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching week after week, his performance, not a fluke. He has been on a streak. And just like Nate Frazier delivers for Georgia, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday you order. Stack it up all season. You could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day. Only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through 11/18. Run along here, Locked On SEC. A pleasure now to catch up with this guy. Haven't talked with him in a while. A guy who carried the rock for the Longhorns and then on into the NFL, and now transitioned into the media world, doing a lot of media work at all the different outlets out there on SiriusXM and, of course, on TV and everywhere else. He is Fozzy Whittaker. Fozzy, welcome in, man. Thanks for the time.
I appreciate you having me on, man. I'm happy to be here. What an exciting week of football we get to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. Some big games here in the SEC. Let's start with your Longhorns. Obviously, playoff hopes very much still alive. They got to win out. What have you made of these last couple of weeks with the Horns? Because they've had some close calls, man, some overtime games, some come-from-behind victories, but they're still alive, and Arch seems to be playing much better these last couple of weeks. What have you made of the Horns?
Yeah, I think I was speaking with Chris Childers and Coach Rick Neuheisel not too long ago, and we were talking about the roller coaster ride that this Texas team has experienced, and that started at the beginning of the season, but even in the past month, like you mentioned, overtime victory and having to do a furious comeback and 2 overtime victories against Mississippi State and Kentucky, and then the way they looked against Vanderbilt, man, it's been a whirlwind of emotions for Texas fans and people that have followed that program. But what I also noticed was the maturation of this team and considerably the growth and maturity level that Arch Manning has been able to possess and the poise that he's kept throughout this entire season, right? When things weren't going well, he was candid and frank about it, saying it wasn't good enough. He's also owned it and said, I got to play better. I will be better. And I would say over these past few weeks, throwing for over 700 yards in his past 2 games, winning both of them and playing really at an elite level. That's the Arch Manning that we expected. And that growth period and that roller coaster of teams and games that they've experienced have made them a better team now as they get ready to probably face their toughest battle to date in conference play against Georgia on the road in Athens Saturday night.
Yeah, that's a place Georgia does not lose very often. Alabama got them
Right.
early this year, but they don't lose very much there. It's funny, though, Fozzy, so much has been made of Arch, and he'll get a lot of the headlines going into this one. But to me, the underrated storyline is Texas has not run the football as well as I thought they would, as anybody thought they would. They got to get back to pounding the rock. And I think coming out of the bye week should help them and getting some of those guys back healthy. C.J. Baxter and Trey Wisner, both guys have kind of had their share of looking good this year, but neither has looked fully healthy. So I guess the thought for Sark in Texas has to be hopefully the extra week off got those guys right. Because I saw the injury report, they're not on it, so they should be able to go. And if that ground game could get going, that'll certainly help take some of that pressure off of Arch.
Absolutely. And having those guys back healthy and everybody back healthy. Wingo is expected to participate, was a full participant in practice, same way with Jelani McDonald, Michael Taft. So across the board, this is the healthiest that this Texas team has been in a long time since the beginning of the season. And so that's where it plays into the factor of being complementary for the run game for Texas. Like you mentioned, it hasn't necessarily been up to par or the standards that Steve Sarkisian has met, or what fans perceive that rushing attack to be. I'm not going to sit here and say that they get it figured out against Georgia, right? I'm not that crazy. Georgia's number 12 in the country, barely allowing right at 100 yards rushing on the season per game from an average perspective. But at the same time, you go back and look at the two kind of case points that we have from last year's games between these two teams, and Georgia was just better on the defensive line and stopping the run. Maybe not necessarily athletic across the board, but they had some dudes and some dogs that obviously went on and play professionally now that helped make that Georgia team a really good team. They don't have those types of caliber players this year. And although Georgia is still really, really good, that does make a difference, and it is significant for what this offense needs to do. And I think for Steve Sarkisian, he learned from both of those games a season ago what started working against Georgia in the second half of that first game and throughout the course of the game in the SEC championship game. And I think that's throwing those short passes as an extension of the run game to keep Georgia honest, but then at the same time slow down that aggressive rush that D-line possesses to be able to run the ball efficiently. And I think I'd be crazy to say, Texas is going to average 5 yards a carry, but if they can be efficient with those carries whenever they call them and keep the ball moving and staying ahead of the chains, get 4 yards on first down or get 5 yards on second down to make it third and manageable, that's where Texas can really excel in a game like this, where everybody's going to be against you. It's going to be a red out. It's going to be loud. The environment is going to be playing a factor from the standpoint of how the operation looks and unfolds for Texas. So in order to try to take the crowd of it, that's when you need to depend on your run game and being able to wear down that defense and give your defense a chance to catch their breath and play at the best of their ability. So I do expect it to be better than what it has been in the past, number one, because of the health of this football team. But at the same time, I think the utilization of the short game and the quick game and the RPOs will help open up some different avenues and alleys for CJ Baxter and Trey Wisner to find some alleys and pick up some valuable yardage because this is going to be a field position type of game.
On the flip side, Fozzy, when we talk about Georgia, Gunnar Stockton, I think, he's played very well this year. I mean, he doesn't turn the ball over. You compare it to Carson Beck last year, who had that stretch was interception after interception. Gunnar takes care of the football, but to me, it feels like Georgia's kind of getting that ground and pound going here. Chauncey Bowens, the freshman, Nate Frazier, the sophomore, the running backs have done really well. And if I look at this Texas team, I still don't know if they fully have matured yet on that defensive line, particularly the interior of that defensive line. If I'm Georgia, I'm looking at maybe that's where I want to attack.
Yeah, I think that's the key of the game. And I was on a podcast last night mentioning what my expectations were defensively for Texas, and it's that interior D-line, right? Whichever pair of nose tackles are in there, whether it's Canoe, whether it's Watson, whether it's Shaw, whoever it may be, the combination of players that has to be pivotal and make an impact on being able to stop what that Georgia rushing attack is, where they're averaging almost 200 yards a game. That's where you get Georgia in trouble. And Alabama, I go back to the lone Georgia loss. Alabama was able to do that. Alabama stayed on the football field first off, third downs offensively. So that helped them play complementary on the defensive side of the ball. Alabama didn't necessarily run the ball very well either. They've been struggling all season, but I want to say they maybe had 115 yards or so rushing against Georgia. But what they did was convert on third downs, and that gave their defense a chance to catch their breath, and their defense played really well against Gunnar Stockton in this offense. Now, since that game, Georgia is also peaking at the right time. Their offense looks even more dynamic than it is. They also get some of their talented playmakers back, especially at the tight end position. So we're starting to see a little bit of both of these teams peaking at the same time. Who reaches that apex first? And I think Saturday night will be a good testament of where these teams are as they head down the stretch for SEC championship play and trying to make that final playoff run. But the interior defensive line and the entire defensive line, including those edge guys, will have to be pivotal and play a factor in limiting the success that Georgia has had in the ground and pound game. And then also making sure you keep Gunnar Stockton uncomfortable, right? He's notorious for extending plays. with his legs, rolling out and still creating downfield opportunities for his receivers. So keeping him contained in the pocket, force him to beat you from the pocket with his arm consistently for 4 quarters. That's, I think, the game plan that Texas has to use to attack, even though Gunner's playing at an elite level right now and probably one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the SEC.
Hey guys, the NBA is back. No better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA, and also loaded with pro football odds and college odds as well. As we take a look at our betting lines from FanDuel for the SEC games this weekend, you got South Carolina at Texas A&M. Aggies an 18.5-point home favorite. I think Aggies win. That's just a lot of points. Look, they've been pulling away from teams as of late, so it's not crazy, but I might lean South Carolina plus the points there. Arkansas at LSU. We'll take LSU minus the 5.5. We'll see what Michael Van Buren can do for them at quarterback if it's not Nussmeier. Tennessee Tech at Kentucky. That's the intriguing one. Tennessee Tech undefeated, 10-0. Kentucky 21.5-point favorite. I might lean Tennessee Tech there. Alabama minus 5.5 against Oklahoma. Ole Miss minus 13.5 against Florida. And Georgia minus 6.5 at home against Texas. Those are your betting lines from FanDuel. And right now, new customers can get $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins at FanDuel. Just head to FanDuel.com, get signed up, play your game with FanDuel. They are the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And, of course, great SEC lines up there as well. Continue our conversation with Fozzy Whittaker. All right, Fozzy, time to have a little bit of fun. We're going to jump into our celebrity guest picker segment. You'll be our celebrity guest picker today. Let's take a look at our season standings. We had Bill Connolly from ESPN.com last week. He went 6-1, so he joins former Gamecock quarterback Steven Garcia, our guy from New Orleans Hold the Mayo, and Jay Crane from Crane & Company. They're all 6-1, so that's the bar. If you go a perfect 7-0, Fozzy, you will be at the top of this leaderboard. And
that's what I'm gunning for.
All right, well, let's dive into it, man. It's very simple. All we're doing is I'm going to give you the game. You're just picking who will win. We're not doing spreads or anything. Just give me the winner, and it's very simple. We'll start you off easy. This one will be Arkansas at LSU. Maybe not so easy. LSU, they've been losing a bunch of games here as of late.
Yeah, it's not an easy one. I think Taylor Green's also an amazing quarterback. I got to figure, though, LSU, they got to figure something out at some point in time. That Arkansas defense is also a work in progress, to say the least. So I give the nod to LSU as a kind of empty the bag at the end of the season.
I'm with you. LSU at home, I feel like, as bad as the offense has been, Arkansas is in the 110s in total defense. So
Arkansas
I think
just as bad defensively.
Whether it's Nussmeier or Van Buren, I think they score some points against Arkansas. All right, next one, Florida at Ole Miss. This is the game that knocked Ole Miss out of the playoff last year, but obviously this Florida team, they're kind of reeling as of late, getting their butts spanked by Kentucky a week ago.
Yeah, they look completely different. I got Ole Miss here. I think that plays a factor, what you mentioned last year, impacting their chances to play in the CFP for the first time. I don't think they let it get close. I think this is a much more mature Ole Miss team, who I covered last week and saw at the Citadel. They got some absolute dudes, and Trinidad Chambliss is playing at an elite level. So I think that gives Ole Miss the opportunity to continue their playoff aspirations.
Man, how you got to have some notes you got to run through doing that game. Citadel, Ole Miss. You're like,
Lane Kiffin photobombed the proposal. That was one of the biggest highlights from that game.
That's what you get deep into your notes on.
Absolutely.
Talk about here. How about South Carolina at Texas A&M? The Aggies, they are rolling, looking like one of the best teams in the country, still undefeated. First time since 1992. Man, in the offseason, Fozzy, this would look like a game of the week, but South Carolina is really falling in hard times.
Yeah, I got A&M. I think they're playing the most complete football within the conference. They've been remarkable. Marcel Reed obviously is playing fantastic. The two receivers, the set of running backs, right? Not just Reuben Owens, not just Moss, who's been down for injury, but now you add in Daniels, you add in E.J. Smith. They got a host of guys that can make plays offensively. That offensive line is legit. And then defensively, we know what they are, right? Cassius Howell, I think, is the best defensive end in the country. Tarian York playing elite at the linebacker position. This team is really, really good. I don't think South Carolina stands a chance.
Yeah, it says something when Emmitt Smith's son is your third or fourth string running
back. Right.
speaks of the depth there. I'm rolling with the Aggies too. I think but we'll see. Can South Carolina keep it close? We'll see if they can give them a game. How about this one, Fozzy? This is a shocker. This is supposed to be a cupcake game, but Tennessee Tech is a perfect 10-0 going into Kentucky. The good news is Kentucky seems to be playing their best football right now. So this one is like, it's on ESPN Plus, but this is one I'm going to seek out. I want to check it out because Tennessee Tech's undefeated.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you from the standpoint of like, this is an intriguing matchup considering how these teams play. But I've already learned my lesson early on with Kentucky. I thought earlier in the season, they had a MAC team. I was like, maybe they'll give them a run for their money. And Kentucky showcased that they still were clearly the better team. And now switching to Cutaboli has been kind of a masterpiece of design for them, as they've been very different from the beginning of the season versus where they are now. They're peaking on a completely different level. And obviously their game last week against Florida, where they absolutely trounced them and forced turnovers and takeaways, that's where Kentucky has really improved the most overall. It might have been the overtime loss to Texas, honestly, that kind of flipped that switch for them. But I think Kentucky wins this very easily.
Yeah, Mark Stoops taking his name off the hot seat too here. If he beats Tennessee Tech, if he finds a way to beat Louisville, they're going bowling. I mean,
absolutely. And the Louisville win would be phenomenal, especially as just what that means in the conference, in the landscape of the conference with the ACC versus SEC, as well as implications into the playoff. Knocking Louisville out could have huge implications across the board. And then obviously beating your rivals is always an added bonus.
I'm going to stick with you. I'm going with Kentucky there. All right, we got 3 more. Mississippi State at Mizzou. Bulldogs still looking for that 6th win. They just need that 6th win. If they can't get it here, they're going to have to get it in the Egg Bowl next week. But Mizzou, maybe Matt Zoller's not playing great quarterback. Maybe this is a chance for State.
Yeah, this is an interesting dynamic because you kind of look at the way Mizzou played against A&M, and the rushers did what they do. They leaned on what they do very well, and both running backs went over 100 yards rushing, but A&M was just too difficult to be able to defend. I think Mississippi State kind of provides a different dynamic. I know it doesn't look like A&M's, but Mississippi State has something that you can't coach, which is unrivaled speed, and Brennan Thompson being able to stretch the field. And obviously Anthony Evans has been dynamic. I think I don't know if Blake Shapen's going to be ready to go for this one. I think that's a critical aspect. But then Kamario Taylor, super athletic, dynamic type of player. Let's go Mississippi State. I think I just talked myself into that.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. You talked me into it too. They can get that 6th win. That'd be great for Jeff Lebby and company. All right, the 2 big ones, Fozzy, the primetime games this weekend. Let's start with Oklahoma at Alabama. We've seen Alabama look. The offense got stymied a little bit against LSU last week. This Oklahoma defense, one of the best in the country. You got to think, Alabama can't run the football. Maybe Oklahoma's weakness is through the air secondary, so maybe that works in Alabama's favor. But how do you see this one?
Yeah, I think similar to the fashion that Ole Miss kind of had this game and this week circled on their calendar because of how it played out a year ago. That's the same mindset I bet Alabama has, because they got absolutely embarrassed in Norman just a year ago. And I know Ryan Williams did his interview and he talked about this is a new season, new team. We're not even thinking about that. But we all know that plays a factor in the way that you prepare for a game whenever you get your butts handed to you the way that they did physically and kind of the emotional drain that has on you throughout the course of the season. And you hear it all off season about how you laid an egg against that team. Otherwise, you would have been in the playoffs. This Alabama team is going to be ready to go, and then you do it in T-Town. I give the edge to Alabama in this game.
All right, I think I'm sticking with you. Alabama at home, but maybe close. Oklahoma, we saw Brent Venables had a game plan last year for him and got the win, so maybe close. Last one, Fozzy, moment of truth, Texas at Georgia.
I think this is where you're going to see what real Texas team stands up, right? Is it the one we saw at Vanderbilt play through 3 quarters? Or is it the one we saw through Florida kind of limp around, or through the first half of Mississippi State where they still look a little uneasy about themselves? The thing that worries me most as a Texas fan is Georgia's peaking and playing their best football right now. And I think doing that Saturday night in Athens might be too much for this Texas team to overcome. So I picked Georgia at home, being able to kind of still figure out what Steve Sarkisian needs to do to crack the Kirby curse at the moment.
Yeah, Georgia was my preseason pick in the SEC, so I'm going to stick with them. But round 3 of Sark versus Kirby, who comes out this one? This is going to be a lot of fun. Fozzy, appreciate it, man. Thanks so much for the time. What game are you on the call for this weekend?
I got Tennessee and New Mexico State, so very similar to what I witnessed last week in Citadel and Ole Miss. So
yeah,
be deep in the story bags. But Tennessee's been fun to watch, explosive team. Very dynamic with the players on the edge, and Joey Aguilar's been a breath of fresh air for Josh Heupel. Defense creating takeaways and causing havoc. So it should be still a fun game and some entertainment happening. A lot of guys should be playing on that roster this weekend.
He is Fozzy Whittaker. Of course, catch him on Sirius XM and on the ESPN family of networks calling games. Fozzy, always appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much.
Appreciate it. 7-0, baby.
There we go. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On SEC. Our thanks again to Fozzy Whittaker for joining us. Hey, a reminder to check out the Locked On SEC TV simulcast daily on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. For any of our listeners who live in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and catch us weekdays at 11:30 a.m. Central on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network, home of the New Orleans Pelicans and home of Locked On SEC. I'm Chris Gordy. Everybody have a great weekend. We'll talk to you guys on Monday.